Much more significant, however, for the Quran's purposes is its narrative of the great prophet Moses, known to Muslims as Musa. The Quran frames its narrative with a polemical point in view, namely to show the very close parallels between the ministry of Moses and that of Muhammad. It states explicitly, for instance, that the two shared the same doctrine. This is Surah 43, verse 11. Like Muhammad, Musa is accused of being a magician by the idolaters. Like him, also he is being given a book. In Moses' case, this is the Torah, in which, as the Quran says, there is illumination and guidance. That's the Quran's description of the Pentateuch. The biography of Moses in the Quran more or less follows the Exodus account, although, as always, it's told only in summary. You have to remember that the Quran is not a history book. It's not the heroic narrative of a people, like the Hebrew Bible. It invokes earlier prophets, but only in a summary way in order to make a particular point. It's not interested in merely supplying historical facts. So in the Quran we find narratives about the infant Moses and how he was cast into the river Nile, and miraculously a member of Pharaoh's family finds him and raises him. As a youth, he accidentally kills an Egyptian and has to flee, and in the desert of Midian, we find him watering the flock of an elderly man, sometimes identified with the prophet Jethro. He marries one of his daughters and serves him for 10 years. He then encounters the burning bush and hears a voice commanding him to go back to Pharaoh, and the voice confers upon him the ability to work two miracles, turning the staff into the serpent and his hand turning to light. So he does this and he confounds the magicians at Pharaoh's court, and they recognize his prophethood, and Pharaoh has them crucified. Then Pharaoh declares himself to be divine, orders the construction of a high tower from which he says, look out over the God of Moses, and God punishes him by granting further empowering miracles to Moses. Then we get a brief sketch of the Exodus and the drowning of Pharaoh and his hosts in the Red Sea. Moses spends 40 nights on Sinai, bringing back the tablets. Today you can visit Mount Sinai. I think one or two have actually done that amongst you. And at the top you'll find a little church and a little mosque happily sitting side by side. But the Israelites, of course, have built the golden calf, and they're punished by having to wander for 40 years in the wilderness. So all of this is more or less familiar from the biblical account. The Quran isn't really saying anything massively new here, but there are minor revealing differences. For instance, the infant Moses is rescued not by Pharaoh's daughter, but by Pharaoh's wife, whose name is Asiya. And in a famous hadith, the Prophet praised Asiya as one of the four women, the four supreme saintly women who've been given perfection by God. Asiya. There's even a hadith in which the Prophet says that a wife who is mistreated by her husband will be rewarded by God on the Day of Judgment with the same reward that God has stored up for Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh. A few other distinctions in the encounter with this figure that seems to be the prophet Jethro. Instead of meeting 7 shepherdesses in the desert, as in the Bible account, Moses encounters only 2. Instead of 10 plagues, the Quran speaks of 9 miracles, which include some of the plagues, the blood, the frogs, and so forth. Also new is the fact that the burning bush appears at night. And also new is the incident of the magicians actually converting to Moses' religion and dying for that belief. So that, in a nutshell, is the Quran's view of Moses, whom the Prophet spoke of as one of the 4 great prophets of history.